Welcome to the Project Management Prepcast, the key to PMP exam success. Here's your instructor, Cornelius Fichtner.
Hello and welcome to the Project Management Prepcast. We are the cutting edge of PMP exam preparation. I'm your instructor, Cornelius Fichtner. Well, this is the third time that you're watching an episode on cross-cutting knowledge and skills. Yet, I'm still going to tell you that PMI has defined 20 of these in the PMP exam content outline, and we want to make sure that you know them, understand them, that you're able to explain them, because on the PMP exam you will very likely see one or two questions about these. Are you maybe wondering why, even though this is the third time that we're getting into this, I'm still repeating this slide here? Or are you maybe surprised that even though you probably already know, I'm still telling you that the lesson focus are the general skills, these 20 cross-cutting knowledge and skills, that this here is the list of them, and because they are just too many, we cut them up into 4 individual lessons, and that right now we're going to start with negotiation, communications, presenting, prioritization, and then we end with problem solving, and that for each of these 5 I'm going to give you a definition. We're going to talk about 2 facts, see where on projects they're being used, and maybe also give you a how-to, steps, tips and tricks. Are you surprised that I repeat this every time? Well, there is a reason why we do this, and we're going to see this reason in one of the upcoming cross-cutting knowledge and skills. We will get to that in cross-cutting skill number 13 in just a few slides, but we have to begin with cross-cutting skill number 10, negotiating. The definition is that negotiation is the process by which 2 or more parties with different needs and goals work to find a mutually acceptable solution to an issue. Because negotiation is an interpersonal process, each situation where you have to negotiate is different and influenced by your style and your skill, as well as the style and the skills, attitudes of the person who is in the negotiation with you. If you remember, we had facilitation in a previous lesson here. So the big difference between facilitation and negotiation is quite simple. Facilitation is assisted negotiation, almost. So somebody else, an impartial individual, helps in the design and conduct of a problem-solving meeting. And the idea of facilitation there is to improve the problem-solving process. Whereas in negotiation, the goal is that we end with some kind of a promise that you and I make to each other in regards to the problem that we have been discussing, that we have been negotiating. Often people think that the key to negotiation is figuring out how to manipulate the other person's perspective, to make them see it your way. Well, okay, these kind of tactics, they can be effective, but frankly, the genuine ability, your ability to say, you know, I don't really need this deal, I can walk away from this deal if it doesn't fit with to our overall goals, is far more powerful a position to be in. Also, negotiation is in business and in a project environment is a rational act. And for the negotiation to be a win-win for both parties, you should feel positive about the negotiation once it's over. This helps keep a good working relationship afterwards. This means that the style of the negotiation should remain rational, factional. Drama and emotions, they are inappropriate because they undermine the rational basis of the negotiation, and because they bring also some kind of a manipulative aspect into the whole discussion. Here are 4 areas that we have identified as where you will be negotiating as a project manager on your projects. Procurement is first on the list. Obviously, you are going to have to work with your vendors, your subcontractors on the various contracts, and there is always some negotiation going on. Acquiring your project team is another area, especially if you work in a matrix organization where you have to work with other project managers, other business executives to get their people from their departments, from their projects onto your team and share the resources. Then we have the trade-offs. Here we're thinking mostly of the competing project constraints, where you have to decide whether it is more important to have a longer schedule or a smaller budget. And of course then we have scope changes, because you will have change requests coming in at an incredible rate sometimes on your projects, and you're going to have to negotiate with the senders of those change requests and figure out, now, how are we going to solve this issue and bring this scope change that you want onto the project in a way that is acceptable for all of us. Here are some tips for you to consider when you negotiate. Begin by soliciting the other person's perspective. Begin by understanding what they need. Use questions to find out what their needs are, what their concerns are. Just simply ask, what do you need from me? Or what are your concerns about the solution that I am suggesting? Then, of course, since you need to know what the other person's needs are, make clear that you also state your needs, and not only what you need, but also why you need them. Remember that often disagreements may exist about how to do something, but not about the overall goal that it should be done. Make sure that before you walk into a negotiation session that you have some options available. Things you could suggest that we could do if the preferred solution that you would like to see is not acceptable for the other party. Anticipate also why the other person may resist your suggestions, and be prepared to counter with an alternative there as well. And here's an interesting one. Don't argue in negotiation. Arguing means that you want to prove the other person wrong. Negotiation, on the other hand, is all about finding a solution. And as you can imagine, if negotiation turns into arguing, when each party wants to prove that the other party is wrong and that my point of view is the right point of view, then absolutely no progress can be made. And last but not least, don't forget to consider timing. There are good times and bad times to negotiate. Bad times would be when maybe there is a high degree of anger about the current situation on both sides, when the other party or when you are preoccupied with something else, when there is a high stress situation going on, when people are tired, or simply when it's Friday, 5 o'clock in the afternoon. All not good times to begin negotiations. Cross-cutting skill number 11 are oral and written communication techniques, channels, and application thereof. Effective oral and written communication skills are absolutely vital for a project manager to run a successful project. The ability for you to convey information, to give instructions clearly and concisely so that they are easily understood, they will determine whether or not you get your message across to a team member, customer, or sponsor. In a survey that was done with recruiters from companies that have more than 50,000 employees, communication skills were cited as the single most important decisive factor for choosing managers. And the survey conducted by the University of Pittsburgh at the Katz Business School, it points out that communication skills, including written and oral presentation skills, as well as the ability to work well with others, are a main contributing factor to job success. And in order to deliver your message effectively, you have to commit to breaking down the various and many barriers that exist as you are communicating in each stage of the communications process. And we'll get back to these barriers in a little while when we review the sender-receiver model. And this here is kind of obvious. Where on projects might a project manager possibly be using oral and written communication skills? You should know this. 90% of your time will you be using these kind of skills. Status reporting, presentations, team meetings, phone calls, discussions with sponsors and customers, you name it. Because 90% of your time is spent communicating either orally or written, you really need to have exquisite communication skills. So, do you remember the basic communications model from the PMBOK guide, also known as the sender-receiver model? Well, let's do a quick review here. It begins with the sender, the person who is initiating some kind of a communication. This person needs to encode the message somehow. In this particular case, right now, I'm encoding the message in words that are both spoken and that you can read on the screen. Then we have to choose a channel. How are we going to get this message to you? This could be person, this could be over the phone, this could be by email, this could be a printed letter, or it could be, as in this case right here, a video. On the end of the receiver, there has to be some kind of a decoding happening. You have to hear the words, read the words, and you have to take the meaning from these words and decode them and interpret them at the receiver's end. And now, bit difficult right here in this particular lesson, because it is a recorded video that you watch on your own. The receiver should also give some kind of feedback to the sender, and the sender is responsible to ensuring that the feedback on his part is received. And of course, both parties also have to ensure that the context of the message that has been sent, decoded, encoded, and received, that this context is properly understood, and both agree on the context itself. Purely theoretically, we would now have to take a look at cross-cutting knowledge and skill number 12, the Code of Ethics. But here on the Prepcast, we have separate lessons on the Code of Ethics, and in this video series here on the PMP exam content outline, we are also going to review each and every one of the tasks that PMI has identified for the process groups and how ethics influences these tasks. So we are going to skip the Code of Ethics. And number 13 here, the presentation tools and techniques, that is the reason why I keep repeating the learning goals and the lesson overview at the beginning of almost every single lesson here of the Project Management Prepcast. But first, a definition. What are presentation tools and techniques? Yes, obviously, it is the practice of showing and explaining a concept, a topic, to an audience or a learner. A few years ago, I became a member of Toastmasters International. Toastmasters International, non-profit educational organization that teaches public speaking and leadership skills through a worldwide network of meeting locations. And as part of that education that I received there, I learned that a presentation has, basically speaking, three parts. First, you tell the audience what you are going to tell them. Then you tell them. And in the end, you tell them what you told them. So always start with an introduction and explain the structure of the presentation in advance. And at the end of your presentation, do a quick review and remind them what it was that you have explained to them. That is why at the beginning of this lesson, I did repeat the learning goals. I did repeat the structure of this video lesson here, even though you had seen this 2 times before already. And let's fast forward to the end of this presentation. Yes, I am going to give you a review slide where you will once again see what it is that you have seen in this particular lesson. You also want to make sure that your presentation is interactive. A bit difficult right now here in the Project Management Prepcast, again, because it is a video that you're watching, but I hope that you can agree that I am trying to make these as informative and enjoyable as it is possible with this kind of communication channel, with this kind of mode of giving you this lesson as we possibly can. And while communication tools and techniques cover 90% of what we project managers do, presentation tools and techniques, well, we still use them quite often, but not as often as we use just general communication tools and techniques. Sales meetings, workshops, customer and sponsor meetings, project kill boards, and training are a few obvious ideas here. And you might say, but wait a minute, you start with sales meeting. I'm not a salesperson, I'm a project manager. I don't go to sales meetings. If you are working for a consulting company, and this is something that I have done previously, often the project manager is brought along to these sales meetings. Yes, there will be a salesperson there who will generally try and sell the product, the project, to the customer, but you as the project manager immediately will have to become a salesperson as well in that particular instance, and your presentation skills to show to the customer that they can trust you to run this project successfully for them is going to be a vital aspect of your company's ability to sell this project to the customer. And here are some points to keep in mind as you are preparing and giving your presentation. Begin with your purpose, with your goal. Define why you are preparing a specific presentation. Is it just to give a training? Is it to get across a certain viewpoint or to come to a specific decision? Each of these will lead you down a different path, a different approach of how you are going to build your presentation. You also need to understand your audience. What is their level of understanding of the topic that you're going to discuss? What language do they speak? And I'm not just talking English or French or German. I'm talking about the technical language. Can you use completely technical language here in this presentation? And what are their interests in your topic? Have a clear message. Of course, if you don't have a clear message, if you just ramble on and on and on, you will simply lose your audience. You want to organize your content for optimal impact. So it's very important to structure it in a logical way so that it's easy for people who are not too familiar with the topic to follow, but also not too boring for all the experts in the audience, and that you put them to sleep. And of course, in the end, you also want to maintain a natural and relaxed state. And well, I'm saying that right now, but you've probably noticed in the past quite often that I sometimes get excited about this and my voice gets loud and I really get into this. Well, that's simply because I'm very enthusiastic about project management and teaching you how to pass the PMP exam. Moving on to cross-cutting skill number 14, prioritization and time management, which is of course the act or process of consciously controlling the order in which tasks are being executed, and also the amount of time that you spend on specific activities, especially with the goal in mind to increase efficiency or productivity. Time management is supported by a range of other skills and tools and techniques that you use to manage your time when you're trying to accomplish specific tasks on your projects. With priority management, we are trying to get into the mode of more thinking and less doing. This is where we can exercise our leadership skills simply by dealing with our own personal schedule. Again, self-management comes first. If we have many things to do, we need to be clear on not only what the most important thing is, but also what our primary goals are. We must ask ourselves if any or all of the activities that we have on the pile of tasks that need to be done will contribute to the accomplishment of our primary goal, which usually is to get a project done. The benefits of time management are many and they're varied, but some of the most important ones include greater productivity, confidence, the ability to meet our goals, and the opportunity also to have fun and to gain control. All of these are, of course, important to successfully completing our project. As you can imagine, prioritization and time management has to do with the schedule, with tasks and activities. It's therefore not surprising that the 4 items we list here on the usage of projects all have to do with exactly that. You need it in project scheduling. You need it in task assignments to your team. Task execution is an area where you'll be needing both prioritization and time management. And then, of course, the techniques of critical path and critical chain require you almost to have mastered prioritization and time management. The process of how to prioritize and manage your time on projects is explained in the PMBOK guide in the project time management knowledge area. So right now, let's take a look at a more high-level process, not only supporting project management here. So begin by setting your goals. Define why you are setting off on the journey that you are setting off here. Next, formulate an action plan. This is where you take the goals that you had and you break them down into smaller pieces, and then you set milestones on those small pieces, because many small successes, well, they will equal one larger step. Frame it in the workflow as your next action item. This is where you take those very tasks that you have and you apply them to your current schedule. You put them into your current schedule. And now that you have a plan of combining your actions with your schedule, break it down into to-do lists. What is it that we actually have to do for each of those actions, for each of those tasks? And then, of course, well, you actually have to do the work there at the very bottom as well. Act on your to-do list. Put your to-do list into action. What you don't see here on the screen, and what is also an important final step of all of this here, is you have to evaluate your progress. This takes us all into monitoring and controlling, obviously. It's a crucial part, because after your tasks have been completed, you should review, you should go back and you should ask yourself, what could we have done better? Cross-cutting knowledge number 15 are problem-solving tools and techniques, which are a series of steps and techniques that you use for generating and analyzing ideas if you need to solve a problem at hand. And these approaches, they can be used on a variety of project-related problems, from specific technical issues such as a particular failure mode that you see during testing, to team process problems like unproductive meetings, or other project issues like why are we constantly behind schedule? Here are a couple of ideas in regards to problem-solving tools and techniques. We begin with APC, which stands for Alternatives, possibilities and choices. Doing an APC means that you are thinking of alternative ways of doing something, possibilities in which you could resolve the problem. And with these multiple choices before this, we can then select the one that seems to be the best solution. Of course, solving problems involves both analytical and creative skills. So which particular skills are needed? Well, that depends on the problem at hand, your authority on the project. But some of these key skills are things like lateral thinking, initiative, logical reasoning, and most importantly, almost, because if you don't have that, a tough problem will never get solved. And that one thing you really need is persistence. If you ask a number of project managers where on their projects they use problem-solving tools and techniques, some of them will probably tell you, everywhere! My whole project is a problem. Well, let's boil it down a little bit more here on a few points. The areas that we see as important areas where you use problem-solving tools and techniques are risk management. And obviously, once a risk materializes, it becomes an issue. Hence, issues management is another area where problems need to be solved. And resource planning. And we point this out here in particular because with resource planning, there are not just the questions of needing to schedule, but there may also be interpersonal issues, interpersonal problems that you need to resolve where problem-solving tools and techniques may be required. Once again, let's take a look at a more generic problem-solving process and the steps that you would want to go through. Begin by identifying the problem. It may seem obvious, but it is important that you know the root cause. You don't want to just simply assume that, oh, over there is the problem that we have to identify, and when you then go and you apply, say, an Ishikawa diagram, you will identify a completely different root cause. Now that you have the actual problem, the root cause, you want to define the problem. You want to describe what exactly is the issue at hand, what exactly is the problem that we need to solve. The next step is to develop a strategy in which you want to attack this whole thing to solve the problem. The approach used will vary, obviously, depending on the situation and also on the unique preferences of you and your project team. Before coming up with a solution, however, we need to first organize the available information. What do we know about the problem? What do we not know about the problem? The more information that you have available about the issue at hand, the more easily will you be able to come up with an accurate solution. Next, you want to allocate resources because you need to do something. You can't just organize your information. Somebody actually has to do something about the problem, and then you want to monitor the progress, and you also at the same time want to evaluate the results, and you want to loop this back to the problem. You want to go back to identification of the problem. You want to see whether or not this process here has led to a successful correction of what's wrong. And with that, we have reached the end of this third presentation here in the cross-cutting knowledge and skills review. Yes, and just to make the point one more time, this is a continuation of what I said in cross-cutting skill number 13 there, the presentation techniques. I am now telling you what I told you. We have seen negotiating, communications, presenting, prioritization, and problem solving. They are gone, and we have one more ahead of you. So I will see you again in part 4 of this lesson here. Until next time.